the Chair of Angli Green, Anglican Church Southern Queensland, Deputy Chair of Queensland Churches Environment Network, which is a commission of Queensland churches together, and on the Management Committee member of the Australian Religious Response to Climate Change. So someone who's really actively working on the issues that we're facing today. So I'll pass over to the Reverend Peter Moore.
Hello, I'm Father Peter Moore, Chair of Angli Green, Anglican Church Southern Queensland. And in 2019, I had the privilege of training with the Climate Reality Project on these issues. I'd like to share some of that training with you today. In 1972, the Apollo astronauts heading for the moon took this photo of the Earth, a beautiful planet floating in dark space. Our planet is surrounded by a thin layer of atmosphere, which maintains an environment for us all to live in. But unfortunately, we're putting a lot of pollutants into that atmosphere, and that's beginning to have long-term effects. Let's look at how it works. Solar radiation arrives on the Earth in the form of light waves. It passes through the atmosphere, and when it reaches the Earth, it warms the planet. As the planet warms, some of that energy is radiated back into space in the form of infrared waves. In the atmosphere, there are greenhouse gases which form a layer, and those greenhouse gases reflect some of that radiated energy back to the planet. And this maintains a steady state with normal fluctuations and a pleasant place for us all to live in. But as we increase our pollution, that greenhouse layer increases in depth, and that means that more of the radiation is reflected back to Earth and the planet begins to warm. And as it keeps warming, it can get very uncomfortable for us. These days, we're spewing something like 152 million tonnes of man-made global warming pollution into this thin shell of our atmosphere every day, every 24 hours, as if it were an open sewer. Where does this pollution come from? A variety of sources, from coal mining, industrial processes, coal and gas-fired power plants, burning of crop refuse, burning of bushfires, landfills, transportation, both land, sea, and even air. The largest source of global warming pollution is indeed burning of fossil fuels. This graph of our burning of fossil fuels from 1850 to the present day shows how it was relatively steady until the war years, and then around about 1950 or so began to increase rapidly. And as it increases, we see on this temperature graph that the average temperature here in Australia has also increased in a similar pattern. Last few summers, we've had record temperatures across Australia, and I'm sure that many of you experienced some of that. A 2-degree increase in average global temperature could mean a 30% increase in extreme rainfall events here in Australia. Let's have a look at the processes. As the temperature of the planet increases, there's more evaporation of water from the oceans. The land itself also dries out as the temperature rises. And as that rises, the amount of water vapor in the air increases, because for every 1 degree temperature increase, 7% more water vapor can be retained in the atmosphere. So this means there's less likelihood of rain, leading to droughts. And when it does rain, the amount of rain is much more than normal because there's a lot more water vapor to fall. We know in Australia here we've experienced massive droughts, long-term droughts, followed by floods. And as the land dries out and the number of storms increase, the dry storms and lightning strikes can start bushfires. And as we experienced last year, there's a vast extent of Australia burnt. That burning caused economic loss to the value of 1.3 billion from other crops, just from pollution and smoke, as much as being burnt directly. Air pollution was a serious problem. We're estimated 3,000 deaths per year in Australia from air pollution, a cost to the economy of 2.6 billion. Animals lose their habitat and lose their lives. 1/3 of the koalas in New South Wales alone were thought to be lost in the fires last year. Businesses are starting to declare that there's increased health risks as a result of these extreme temperature changes. Banks are starting to withdraw finance from fossil fuel industry because they've become stranded assets and they have consequences for insurances, so it might be impossible to insure. But Australian government still pours $30 billion per year to subsidise fossil fuels here in Australia. But the investment in renewable energy is nowhere near that high. This graph shows that from 2004 to 2018, the fluctuations. See a peak when there was a price on carbon, and when that price came off, it dropped off and then reached another record high in 2018, just below $10 billion for that year. 2019 and 20, we don't have the details at this stage, and with COVID-19 and the government looking at a gas-led recovery, we're uncertain as to what that might be. Maybe we can exercise our voice and encourage the government to do the right thing. Enough solar energy reaches the Earth every hour to fill all the world's energy needs for a full year. Here in Australia, all we need to use is 0.1% of the incoming solar energy to meet our energy needs for a year. Because solar energy is not available 24/7, and neither is wind energy, but by linking solar energy and wind energy to batteries and pumped hydro, we can get a reasonable supply, reliable supply. So it's up to us to join with those who are using their voices, their votes, and their own personal choices to fight for their future, their community, and for their world. The student strike gave a big impetus back in 2019 and massive rallies around Australia and overseas. And here's a photo of one of our groups in Brisbane rally in September 19. But where do you get reliable sources, reliable information with all this fake news around? Well, the Bureau of Meteorology has YouTube videos, one of which is Why Are Australia and Earth Warming? They have others on drought, the impact on our coasts, the climate change in the Pacific causing flooding of the islands, the La Nina effect, among other things. The Climate Council, those scientists that the government sacked because they weren't giving them the information they wanted to hear, they wanted to stick to the facts, now operate independently without government subsidy and from donations, and they still provide very reliable information. The Climate Reality Project has a renewables ebook online, which is downloadable and has a lot of useful information there. Solar Citizens have a summary brochure and 8 regional fact sheets on renewables. They're also available online. Climate Solutions Projects have a Facebook page. Plastic Less Living to reduce the plastics in our oceans and that form of pollution. And the fake news, how do we respond to it? Well, skepticalscience.com is a good place to get true factual responses to their misinformation. And I refer you to that for reliable information. It's good though to join a group where you get the support of other people. The student strike movement is mainly online these days, but they're still very active. There are a number of faith-based groups around, Australian Religious Response to Climate Change. They're one of the foundation members of the new Green Faith International, a multi-faith international group, preparing a document called Sacred People, Sacred Earth to present to world leaders. A call for a clean recovery from the economic situation we're in, to invest in renewables. Green has a Facebook page. Information there. We put many links to news and articles around the place. The Anglican Communion Environmental Network is another source of reliable information, and I'm sure there are plenty others. But there is solidarity when we join with other people, when we come together. If you have a faith, then a faith-based response to caring for creation might be useful for you. If you wish to offset your costs, your emissions, then Green Fleet is a place that is pretty reliable on investing in the right means of reducing carbon in the atmosphere and drawing down, planting trees and plantations. The Drawdown organisation itself has very valuable information there in all sorts of areas. The important thing is to educate yourself, to be informed, to talk to others, especially leaders and influential people in the community and government at all levels. When it comes time to vote, to consider the position of the candidates and vote considering the climate crisis that is before us. It's our world, and our world depends on us caring for it.
Thank you, Peter. That was a really inspiring talk to finish off our series of workshops over these last 2 days on sustainability. And thank you very much for your passion and your action as well. Great stuff to hear.
Thank you.